Okay. Hello, hello. Hello, hello. Can you hear me? Hello, I'm here. Guys, hello. Twitch chat, can you guys hear me? Twitch, you guys can hear me. All right. Okay. Do that. For some reason, the internet gets really fucky like around this time, which is not ideal. Not ideal. Calmly Fred, can you hear me? Oh, wait, hold on. Hang on. Uh-oh. What's happening? Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Anywho, yeah, listen, I want to give you the last word here.
Yeah. So I think AI can be very helpful. I think that you would just need legislation so that there's a lot more transparency around how these models are being trained, because you could essentially run into the same issues that you have with the internet if it's behind like an algorithm that's IP protected.
Right.
In the short term, I do think that AI is not going to help with that. I think that the displacement of jobs from AI is going to lead to people just not having trust in AI at all. And it'll be seen as like the bigger like deep state type thing.
Yeah, that's a risk. That's definitely a risk for sure.
But long term, I do agree. We're talking 100, 150 years from now. I think a lot of the issues that we're running into, you won't have anymore because AI will be great enough that everybody understands it, and hopefully it kind of transforms our society. But last thing, I just want to say, like I love the things that you do, Hutch. You are a king. Keep pushing the liberal agenda. Keep pushing against both sides here, where you got DGG trying to take you down, and you got the leftists that are coming after you. You're fighting the good fight, and I'm here to support you.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate that. All right, man. Well, you take it easy.
You as well.
Bye bye. Calmly Fred, can you hear me?
I'm with you, Hutch. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Awesome. Do you remember our call last week, or?
If you remind me, I can remember.
Yep. So I was the guy that called in, talked about the 14th Amendment, Section 3.
I remember you. Yeah, I remember your voice now. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So I was generally happy with the call last week. I think we agreed on all the points that I wanted to get out. We agreed that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment bars insurrectionists. We agreed that Congress has the power to effectuate the 14th Amendment. We agreed that there's nothing illiberal about those two facts. And we also agreed that it's not necessarily a fantastic campaign issue.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't touch on how to think about these areas of agreement, and I want to talk to you about that. I'm going to try to keep this as grounded as possible, but I think this might be a little bit more of a conceptual conversation than last week.
I'm just bringing other people in, but I'm listening.
Yep.
Go ahead. Keep going.
Yep. That's just kind of signposting where I'd like to take this conversation. So you remember our conversation. I really don't like asking these binary questions, but I think it's useful insofar as it like gets facts down. But do you agree that the Constitution requires that the government must do some things?
Do I agree that the Constitution says that the government must do some things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution requires the government to provide a speedy trial, conduct a public trial, have an impartial jury, etc., like a bunch of other stuff.
Right.
You agree that, like, the government has to do that.
Yeah.
You agree that it would be bad for, let's say, like a Newsom administration to ignore these Sixth Amendment rights in prosecuting a retribution campaign against Republicans.
Oh, crap. What the fuck is going on with my screen right now? What is that? Uh-oh. Hang on. Is that my camera fucking up, or is that... What the fuck is going on? What is that? Why is it doing that? I think it's good. All right. Sorry. Say that one more time.
So you agree that the Constitution requires the government to do some things. I'm asking, do you agree that, like, it would be bad for the government to ignore, like, these Sixth Amendment obligations in prosecuting a retribution campaign against Republicans in, like, 2029?
It depends on who you talk to, I suppose, but it's bad for people that think that the system is worth preserving.
But you think it would be bad if they just, like, arrested Donald Trump and then never tried him, violating the Sixth Amendment obligation to provide a speedy trial.
Yeah, it would be bad for about 15 different reasons, but
okay.
The main badness would be, I think that would just speed up the process of just becoming a failed state and maybe going to some kind of civil war. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, the real crux of what I wanted to talk to you about today is to what extent you're concerned about adhering to the liberal principles in the Constitution versus, like, to what extent you're a pure, what I think of as an act consequentialist, but I think you call it, like, being a trolley problem liberal. Sometimes it sounds like you view yourself as a trolley problem liberal because you've said that, but other times, just as now, you've said that, like, laws shouldn't be broken. One time I think you said something like, there's no point in breaking the law to hold Trump accountable because that, like, one of the reasons why we shouldn't do that is because then we'd be worse than Trump. So what are we fighting for?
Yeah.
So do you, I recognize it's kind of an abstract question, but, like, to what extent do you think it's important to adhere to these principles because they're principles that are worthy of adherence versus adhere to these principles only to the extent that you think doing so is in, like, your policy agenda preference?
Well, I think that the principles are good. I mean, I am very focused on, like, actions and consequences just in the way that I look at the world. And I think the reason why you want to adhere to these principles is because liberal democracy is the best system that the world has ever known so far. It provides the most, like, freedom and prosperity for people, and it does the best job at safeguarding against concentration of power, and which would lead to outcomes where people have to live under a authoritarian state where their freedoms and their ability to prosper are greatly limited in those kinds of systems. And so, it's not about, like, some abstract commitment to a principle. It is about rather the outcomes. Like, when countries adhere to these principles, better outcomes generally happen relative to countries that don't have these kinds of safeguards and principles.
And when you say that, you say it, like, very generally and abstractly about liberal democracies, but are you really referring to, like, our liberal democracy, our constitutional order, like the United States,
Not
or
not just America, no. Lots of liberal democracies in the world.
So the reason why I asked that is because to me it seems obvious that, like, certain institutional designs that seek to implement liberal democracy will not be like nearly as resilient or powerful as like the US liberal democracy.
I mean, there's going to be, I think, democracies that do liberalism better than America, and then there's going to be some that do worse. Like, I think that having publicly financed campaigns, that's more, to me, that's like more liberal, more democratic, less vulnerable to corrupt influence. And other, especially in in Canada, as I understand, and a lot of EU countries, like they have like these publicly financed campaigns, and they don't have the same kind of Citizens United concerns that the problems that we have here. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, and I think maybe the question was ill-formed, because I agree with everything that you're saying. What I'm really trying to get at is the U.S. Constitution provides the bedrock framework for the U.S.'s liberal order, and I'm just curious as to what extent you believe we should ignore the dictates in our Constitution for the benefit of what we as individuals would predict would serve our individuated policy preferences. And I think that this is an interesting question related to the conversations that you've had, because sometimes it seems like you're very comfortable saying we need to adhere to these principles. The Sixth Amendment says that there's a speedy trial right. So even though I hate Trump, we shouldn't arrest him and deny him a trial right. But in other situations, like when we look at the Article 3 of the 14th Amendment, you do this calculation about what's politically palatable. So that's kind of what I'm trying to probe with this line.
It's because I do view the current situation as so extreme that and the potential dangers ahead are so extreme that I would be willing to compromise some of these principles. It's just at that point, it's just a matter of to what degree. But I would never tell you that you should just adhere to liberal principles because liberalism is good. Therefore, you should just do more liberalism, because that doesn't really work if somebody comes along and actually destroys the Constitution or actually concentrates power in ways that Trump hasn't done yet. You can make an argument that we're headed towards that direction. You might be right, but a lot of the suggestions that I heard from Destiny and that I hear from a lot of people in my chat are arguments in favor of Newsom going well beyond what Trump has done in terms of violating the Constitution or the law or being draconian.
Yeah, I hear you. These conversations are difficult because there's so many things that you said there that I could respond to, but I just want to try to stay on this specific line. So it sounds like to me you're saying that we should adhere to liberal principles, not as a deontological rule that we always should follow these principles blindingly. But you're also trying to say you're not a pure consequentialist in the sense that you don't think we should try to divine the results of every single move that we make. It sounds like you're saying these rules are generally good. You're kind of a rule consequentialist about it, if you know what that means. You're saying these rules are generally good. They generally produce better outcomes. So saving extreme circumstance, we should follow the rules. But sometimes in light of the facts before you, you think there are certain principles, even in the Constitution, that we should disregard because in your mind, you think you can predict that disregarding those principles will produce better outcomes. And in other circumstances, you take the opposite approach where you say we should abide by these principles because you think that failure to abide by the principles, just as a general matter of you should follow the rules most of the time, that's your guiding light.
I
Is
guess I
that
don't really
too
see
scrambled or?
I guess I don't really see the contradiction. Like the liberalism is not a self-unaliving pact. And so if a Republican president were to take power, literally steal an election, declare war on blue states, then, that's a new dynamic. Now we're in a new situation where like adherence to liberal principles would necessarily mean the end of you as like a nation or a political ideology, or in this case, like liberalism, I guess. You couldn't use like you couldn't apply like a strict liberal framework in the context of, fighting the Nazis. Like you had that required bombs and guns and violence. So similar to that situation, if there was something from within the country that posed a true existential threat, then I obviously think that you should take you should be willing to compromise some of these principles in the short term to to stop that from happening. But I think like the degree to which I'm seeing a lot of people in my chat take their prescriptions, I think they think that it would just end and MAGA would be crushed and they would learn their lesson and there would be a reckoning, and their vision seems a bit utopian for me, because when I imagine Newsom, for example, like hypothetically ignoring a Supreme Court to tell him, if he imprisoned Trump and then the Supreme Court ruled that the imprisonment was unconstitutional and he told him to get fucked, then at that point I think we're just like fully off to the races, and political violence will just build more and more and more each month until it reached a pretty critical breaking point.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm really thinking more on the other side of the like balancing act that I'm trying to lay out here. Like the 14th Amendment, Article 3 of the 14th Amendment, just like the 6th Amendment, obligates the government to do some things. You're saying that we need to follow the 6th Amendment in terms of how we proceed if we were to take power, but we don't need to follow the 14th Amendment.
Well, no, I don't agree. I mean, listen, I think ideally, if we had a more functional system, then like Trump never would have been allowed to run again. But ultimately, that was up to the Supreme Court's interpretation. They are the last arbiter of how to interpret these things. And they decided in their infinite wisdom that the state level challenges to Trump being on the ballot, that the states didn't have the authority to do that. It had to come from the Congress, as I understand it.
Yes, I agree with that. They said that it is the Congress's responsibility to explain how Article 3 works and applies. But Section 3, I keep saying Article 3, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment obligates categorically the Congress under that interpretation to bar insurrectionists from holding office, and currently they do not. Save for one criminal statute, the 14th Amendment, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is moot. So I find that that's pretty similar to failing to have a system that effectuates the dictates of the 6th Amendment. And what I'm getting at is, it seems like you're saying that it's essential that we follow the 6th Amendment, but we can just like tolerate Congress ignoring Section 3 of the 14th Amendment.
I don't think you should tolerate it. I think you should number one, move to elect a different Congress, and number two, you should pursue reforms to address these kinds of problems. Like the fact that there's even like a question or there any ambiguity. Well, that seems like a pretty good reason to like reform the system to clarify these things and to make it more firm. The Congress's role in, determining if someone's done an insurrection, or like setting out some kind of a process, because this feels like pretty counterintuitive that Trump could do what he did and still run for president. It's just kind of insane. I don't blame other countries from looking in to us and thinking like, holy fuck, what a broken system. I agree with that. But my whole thing this whole time has been to pursue reforms. Like, are you making the case that, you know, Trump having violated, I guess Trump and Republicans having violated the 14th Amendment in this way is just as bad as, or would represent a more of a threat, or maybe the same kind of threat of widespread political violence, potentially civil war, as this hypothetical with Newsom, you know, arbitrarily.
Almost. What I'm saying is, like, if in 2029 we have both houses in the presidency and we fail to effectuate Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, the Congress would be violating the Constitution, because the Supreme Court has said it's Congress's responsibility to effectuate Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And I understood your position following our conversation last week, which I didn't really push back on, because I feel like for the most part on the important issues that I wanted to address in that conversation, we agreed. I feel like in our conversation last week, your view was that because it's politically unpalatable to aggressively or at all pursue Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, the Democrats shouldn't do that if they take power in 2029. Even though if you read Section 3 and read what the Supreme Court says, it's very categorical that no person that was an insurrectionist shall hold office. We know that there are many, many insurrectionists in society that currently hold or will hold office. And that will be true in 2029 if we have a trifecta. So why is it the case that the Congress can shirk their constitutional responsibility to effectuate Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, but we shouldn't shirk our obligation under the 6th Amendment to, for example, provide a speedy trial even to political adversaries?
I think there's orders of magnitude difference here between Congress abdicating or like failing to follow through on what you might say is like their duty to prevent these kinds of things from happening. And in my mind, that's almost like entirely a Republican problem. It's just the Republican Party is just completely rotten. And so we just can't count on them to, I mean, ideally, Trump would have already been impeached and removed at this point in the second term so far. If we had a Congress that was actually, if we had a Republican Party that was not so beholden to, you know, the whims of a con man and, you know, but there's a difference between Congress failing to act on what you might say is their duty and someone like the president incarcerating a former president and then ignoring a Supreme Court ruling to telling them to release him. I think one of those things is much, much, much more likely to produce like mass political violence than the other. I think the example of Newsom doing that thing is actually worse than, in terms of the risk, than what you're saying. So I don't really know how to reconcile that. I mean, it feels like we just fundamentally disagree on that point.
I don't. So like, there's something weird about what's going on here, because like in the Sixth Amendment case, you're asserting that we should follow the rules because that will be more likely to produce like order and would be good, I guess, for the Democratic Party as a political matter. But in the 14th Amendment case, it sounds like you're suggesting that we should break the rules because that will be more likely to create order and help the Democratic Party as a political.
What rule am I asking to break on the 14th Amendment?
If you look at Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, you can pull it up. It's very clear. It's categorical. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress, etc., if they're an insurrectionist. It's pretty similar to the language of the Sixth Amendment that says, like, in all criminal prosecutions, X, Y, and Z.
But what am I?
The only difference is that the Supreme Court said, go ahead.
How am I advocating to break it?
Because you're saying that the Congress can shirk its obligation to give life to Section 3 of the 14th Amendment
That's
for
not me
political
saying,
reasons.
but that's not me saying I think that should be broken. I think that we should or shouldn't. I think we should have a Congress that takes their oversight role seriously. I think the Republicans should be a political party that is willing to put party over country over party, but they're not. And so, you know, if we take back the House and the Senate, then, you know, I don't know what that looks like, you know, but maybe the Democratic led Congress, like I would not be opposed to them pursuing this particular line of like constitutional thinking. Like if the Democratic Party led Congress wants to, would it come in the form of a bill, or like what would that look like? What did the Supreme Court say the process looks like for Congress to decide if someone has? Are they saying impeachment? Is that how you do that?
No, it's a bill. So they say they cite Section 5 of the in Anderson and Trump v. Anderson. They cite Section 5 of the 14th Amendment that says the Congress shall have the power to enforce, by appropriate legislation, the provisions of this article.
Okay.
To conclude, I think incorrectly, but it's what they said, and there's the Supreme Court, that it's the Congress's exclusive authority to effectuate Section 3 by appropriate legislation.
Then I think that the Democrats should do that. I think they should do that. But
okay, that seems slightly different. Good.
Well, I mean, that would be within the system, right? Like that would be something that would be within the system. That wouldn't be them like breaking. You're saying that they have an obligation to do that. So if the next Congress is sworn in, I mean, I'm just taking your word for it, by the way. I mean, I would want to ask like Pisco and other people, but you know, then of course I would be in favor of them doing something like that. I don't know what it means necessarily to do it to Trump, like after he's served out his second term and he can't serve again, but yeah.
Well, there are lots of people that participated in the 2021 insurrection or gave aid or comfort to those that participated in the.
Yeah, do that then.
Okay, that makes sense.
We can't count on Republicans to do it, but that's not the same thing as me saying we shouldn't do that or that should be broken or whatever.
Yeah, when I listened back to our conversation last week, what I interpreted you as saying is that because it would be so unpopular to hold the people that violated Section 3 of the 14th Amendment accountable, Democrats
I didn't say that though.
Should not do it.
I didn't say that it wouldn't. It depends on how you do it. That's my whole thing. It depends on how you do it. If you do it in the way that a lot of people have been saying in the last couple of weeks, where it's just you start going after fucking parking tickets and doing all that shit, then I think the public will be like, what the fuck is going on? I just wanted lower gas prices. But if you do it in the way that you're doing, I don't necessarily think that would be something that the public would like reject.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're on all fours there. I guess there's like a lot of play in the joints, and I think that on certain ends of the spectrum, you would probably revert back. But I guess I could just ask you. So, like, the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment says you're ineligible to hold office even if you give aid or comfort to those that engaged in insurrection or rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
A bunch of bureaucrats passed loyalty tests where they attested to false results in the 2020 election. A bunch of Congress people push the 2020 election conspiracy, which aids in this attempt to obfuscate /
I think I see where you're going. I think now you're starting to wade into the perceived overreach kind of waters. I think if you take it too far, and you might even be justified, all things being equal, and if we were living in like rational times, but I think at that point when the Democrats start talking about like kicking elected Republicans out of office, then I think you are wading into waters where the public will perceive that as overreach and punish Democrats and empower Republicans to win future elections. And at that point, what did you gain for that? Because now they might be inclined to, you know.
And this is the like more, I guess, philosophical, predictive punditry question that I wanted to get at in this call, which is like, why should anyone believe that they're able to parse out what actions will cause what politically when drawing this line? Like, it seems like there are certain instances where it's like more clear than others, but like you're not even willing to entertain. And I'm not suggesting that you should, because I agree with you on this, that we should disregard the Sixth Amendment. But you are willing to entertain that to some extent we should disregard the 14th Amendment if doing so would be deemed like too aggressive by the public and thus lead to backlash. But like, how can you have so much confidence in your ability to evaluate the way that the public will respond to like just effectuating the Constitution as written?
I mean, I wouldn't bet my life on it. These are just like my gut feelings as being someone who's been relatively engaged in politics for his entire adult life. There was like a brief lapse where I kind of checked out for a little bit, but no. And just based on what I know of the American like voter, like the voting electorate, and this is just something that like perceived overreach is always something that is like a consideration. And, you know, there's been several times in my lifetime where the voters have punished perceived overreach. 1998, I would say 2008, 2010, 2018, 2020, 2022. And I think like when we get up to these midterms, I think we're going to have a really good midterm cycle. And I think that will be in part because of like in large part because of perceived overreach of this administration. So, you know, it happens a lot. And so if you use the government in the way that you're discussing right now, then I do think that there's just like a very significant risk that the Republican and conservative media apparatus will they'll kick into overdrive like right away. They will 24/7 just pound the airwaves with their propaganda efforts that they do. And I think it'll work. I think it'll work. I think the Democrats will lose the faith of the people in that hypothetical.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that I think I really don't know. I find this question very difficult, and really what I wanted to get out is like the difficulties of it. But I think the same thing could be true can be said of like the Sixth Amendment, especially if you look at states, because the Sixth Amendment is incorporated against the states. So state courts also have to provide speedy trial to criminal defendants. And there are judges that are elected in these local jurisdictions. Like I can represent to you, but I think that you can just like grok it, like you can intuitively understand it, that there are many cases where state court judges will guarantee these rights despite them pissing off people because people do really heinous crimes. And then these judges have to respect the Sixth Amendment, even if it's contrary to their political ambitions. And I imagine that you'll say like, yeah, those judges have to do that. They have to follow the Sixth Amendment. They don't get to like parse a judgment call about whether it's good for their next election and whether it's good for what they believe to be the the overall benefits that they can provide on the bench versus their opponent. You see what I'm getting at? Like,
I guess I think I draw a distinction in kind, you know, like there feels like a difference in kind, again, to the idea of like Congress failing to do their constitutionally obligated duty in this respect to like determine if someone has committed an insurrection, therefore cannot be, you know, ever allowed to run for office ever again. And I think there's more wiggle room in that area than there is for a president to just straight up ignore the Supreme Court and keep hypothetical Donald Trump in prison. I don't know if I'm smart enough to articulate why, but that's just where I intuitively go. It does feel like there's more wiggle room there.
What I recommend to you, and
I
if
want
you
to
want
give
to
you
talk,
the last. I want to give you the last word though, because there's other people that.
sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good. What I recommend you is just like read Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and then right after, read the Sixth Amendment, and then see if there's any difference in kind with respect to how categorical the language is. And I think you'll find that there isn't.
Well, what if,
So
for
yeah, I really
example,
appreciate the
what
time.
if, for example, the Congress, they determine the Congress that the people elected, they do take up the matter and they determine that Donald Trump didn't do an insurrection. I think that's what's different here. Like, that's the fact
Well, that would be like if the Supreme Court determined that the right to a speedy trial means that there's an unlimited right to hold somebody without their consent in confinement pre-trial, because the language is very categorical. Like, you can just imagine that there'll be disregard for the text of the Constitution, but in that case, they're just failing their constitutional responsibility that they're obligated to uphold. If they do that, and that doesn't mean that you just like accept it. That means that there's a blatant violation of the Constitution,
right.
that
And
the people that were.
And you should push for a new Congress. You should push to elect a new Congress. That's how this works. If the Congress are not fulfilling one of their constitutionally, you say obligated roles in this respect, then it is up to the voters to replace that Congress with a Congress that will do that.
I agree with that, which is one reason to think that if we do gain a trifecta, we should be voting with a mind to electing a Congress that will effectuate Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, as is like their duty. But I don't want to eat up too much of the stream time. I really appreciate you having me on, and hopefully this gives you something to think about. So thanks for having me on, which I appreciate you.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.
All right, bye-bye. All right, which of you want to go first here?
If it's cool, I would. I gotta go fairly soon.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just speak up. I have you turned up to 200 and you're still...
Yeah, I'll turn it up.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, do you remember our conversation last time, Hutch?
No, remind me.
Okay, so we talked about a couple things, but the one I want to reiterate, because that's where I'm going here, is we kind of talked about messaging, and I was really pushing for more messaging from like the pundits, media, politicians, candidates, all of those people towards like the reforms that we believe in, or at least like soft pitching them or like messaging on them to start establishing kind of that awareness in the media now with disengaged voters and with like the really politically engaged voters. And you had some pushback, and I believe your core disagreement with me was that, those things there's no evidence that those things help us win elections now. And so you were kind of against that because you're like, don't fuck with the formula. We're winning. Like all signs point to us winning. All
right. Yeah. So you were, if I recall, I was saying that Democrats should pretty much stay laser focused on like affordability stuff and healthcare, and they are talking about government corruption, but they're not like specifically saying we need to prosecute Republicans and blah blah blah. And maybe you would have been saying, well, you do those and you also do like, let's lock them up.
Yeah. So I do not think we should be saying we should lock them up. I think that is too, especially for the time we're in, like current time right now, that is too aggressive right now. But here's my pitch for you. So I think we do have evidence that pitching these like policy ideas or messaging on like broader policy plans do like create groundswell support, which then does lead to voter turnout and like winning elections. And I think we can look to the Trump administration and Republicans in general over like the last like 12 years or so to show us this. I think it was very clear in both of Trump's wins that the reason that he won was because he both attacked Democrats on policies that he believed that the public was against. And then I think he also identified like a feeling in the electorate that there were like the culture war issues, like the whole America First stuff, kind of like in his first term or first campaign, like the law and order, like stances he was on, opposing the ACA. Like these are all things that Trump and Republicans like message on like nonstop, and they have been messaging on these things nonstop for like the last 12 years.
Okay.
And I think we can see that all of that messaging has generated like real support for those issues. And I've seen, at least anecdotally in my own life, people who that messaging has worked to make those issues like ones that they emotionally connect to and care about.
Give me some examples.
Okay, so I think there are so many people who have never interacted with a trans person before who believe that they are actively causing problems in our country.
Right.
Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that is solely from Republican messaging. Like, I don't think if no messaging, those people would never have cared. Like, it would have been something maybe. Oh, actually, okay. What do you think they care about? Like, what do you think like they tie with?
I think a large part of it obviously is coordinated messaging from Republicans and fear mongering and whipping up the anti-trans hysteria. I actually think that some of the more kind of fringe elements within the Democratic Party, they kind of made that job easier for Republicans with being too scoldy and smug.
Yeah. And, like the way we push back against those talking points like led to more disillusionment from like people against our positions.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about like but again, I think it's more like there's a element within the Democratic Party that I think has outsized influence. And I think that they've made Republicans' jobs just much easier.
Okay.
Like the fact that so many, like, this is the question of like Nancy Mace asking, Tim Walz on Capitol Hill, like, what is a woman? Like, this is insane that that democratically aligned people and Democratic politicians still have not found a way to just answer that question in a way that makes them look really silly. And there's just such an easy answer to the question. You say, well, a woman is an adult human female, and then there's trans women, and then, like that's all you got to do. But I think that they're afraid that if they say that, it'll push back against the orthodoxy of just like trans women are women. And I think generally speaking, I think trans women are women. I support that entirely. And I don't think that like, any effort to like not acknowledge that feels very cruel and just not my values whatsoever. But there's nothing wrong with answering the question in that way. But I think there's a culture within the Democratic Party right now where the people are afraid to step out even slightly from the established orthodoxy in terms of language, acceptable language and acceptable framing. That they end up making Republicans' jobs much easier. You can just make Democrats look really silly by asking them questions that they feel afraid to answer. Does that make sense?
I would agree with you. Yeah. I think that's more of a like our candidates and our elected officials. That's more of a sign of their weakness than I think the Republican strength, which I think is what you're saying. So I agree.
Right.
So then let me test you then, because I agree with you, which is why like I think Democrats should be taking the messaging strategy of Republicans and attacking Republicans on things that I believe they will not know how to answer, not because they're not capable, like our candidates seem to be, of just answering in a meaningful, like reasonable way that just appeals to normie people. Because I think most people listening to like you or me talk about like trans people would be like, oh yeah, like that seems like really reasonable and like we don't need to spend more time talking about this. But like we can target Republicans on issues. So I have a few reforms that I think you and I would agree on that poll above 70% nationally that I think are like we can start floating messaging and maybe not quite policies, but like at least messaging in this direction to start spurring support online and, you know, from less engaged voters
All right.
to prepare for this. So let me give you some of them. So, and let me just say quickly, I know I'm kind of rambling, but
I don't think you're rambling. I'm following you.
okay. So I just want to say that I think that an issue that you are seeing, and I think the whole like kind of liberal online community right now is seeing, is that people who are either online or online and politically engaged are getting black-pilled and a little bit white-pilled. And they're getting black-pilled from like all they see are all the insane things that Trump does, right? And so they're getting black-pilled by seeing all these insane things. They're like, what is going on in our world? And then they're being told that either the solutions that they agree with from either pundits or people like yourself or whatever telling them, or from other people like, you know, that whoever they're listening to, they're either being told those solutions are too extreme, or they're being told they will not do enough to stop what's happening or prevent it from happening in the future. So like that, I think, is creating a feeling of like extreme black pill. And then the kind of white pilling thing is, I think, what some people have had complaints with you about, which is that like there's almost like but when you believe that things are going to work out if we play within like certain boundaries, there's like a lethargy you can feel that like, oh, like we're just gonna believe things are good, and then when they're so bad we can't do anything anymore, like there's nothing we can do now. So do you have any disagreement with like those feelings that I think a lot of people online are having?
I think you're describing the very psychologically uncomfortable experience of feeling powerless.
Oh, I agree.
I think that's that's the feeling that is radicalizing a lot of people. Like, not to get all therapy speak with you or recovery speak, but usually anger is like a secondary kind of emotion. And usually the emotion that is under the anger is fear. And when you have a situation like we have now with Donald Trump, where he's baked in, there's very little that we can hope to do within the boundaries of the system to remove him from office. That would necessarily require a lot of support from Republicans to do that, which is just not going to happen. And so there's not, we're kind of powerless to remove him from office right now. And we're kind of powerless to reverse or begin the process of reversing his bad policies until we maybe get a trifecta in 2029 when the new Congress is sworn in and the new president is sworn in. And so I think people feel like it's almost like the Israel-Palestine stuff. It's almost like how lefties felt. It's a lot like that, actually. Did you read the ContraPoints post about that whole, you remember her doing that post about Israel-Palestine?
ContraPoints?
Yeah. Do you know who she is? No,
I don't.
She's great. You should follow her on Twitter. She just came out with a new video too, actually. I don't even know what it's about. We should watch that. But she did like a Instagram post where she articulated her frustrations with the pro-Palestine online left. And her analysis was that the movement failed to articulate any plausible win conditions because they were going for one state solution, like strictly anti-Zionist. They had like these really specific prescriptions. You can agree with like 95% of these people on their assessment about what is happening in Gaza, what's happened in Gaza for decades, let alone in the last like 3 years or so. But if you, for example, disagree and say, well, actually, I think only a two-state solution makes sense. And if you disagree on like particular language that is being used, then they would just cast you out and consider you like a ultra-Zionist genocide supporter. Mm-hmm. And her whole thing was like, because the pro-Palestine online left failed to articulate any like plausible, reasonable win conditions, all it did was it just created this online culture of just being furious every day, like getting more and more furious. Like if you don't give people some kind of an outlet, like something that you can work to actually reasonably expect to accomplish in the short term, then you're just creating the conditions for that anger to just build and build and build and build. And I think that's kind of what's going on with what I've been confronted with lately.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
So like what I'm saying is those feelings, we can, I say we as in the collective, like liberal media, we can focus that towards real things that will help these people in their lives, like not to get to therapy or whatever to speak, but like we can take that fear of like hopelessness, of lack of power, like feeling like you're just like at the boot of somebody else, out of this administration, and channel that into like hope and motivation and action. And I think the way to do that is to take issues that people care about. So like the ones I'm going to bring up here, like, so these are some polling reforms, or policy reforms, whatever you want to call them, that poll above 70%. Digital privacy and AI privacy, merit skill-based immigration system, federal elected and appointed insider trading ban, child tax credit, and universal pre-K. These are all things that poll super high. Yeah. I think you would be hard pressed to find many people who like you could talk to, have a real conversation with, who would disagree with protections or reforms in these areas, or the programs to like fund child tax credit, universal pre-K, whatever. So like if we can start messaging on these things and motivating people who care about these issues or want these things. I mean, I have a kid. Like I am active in like pushing for these things. So like any sort of mobilization, I think, is an outlet for these people, including myself, to just have some catharsis, to feel like you're making a difference and actually make a difference. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think like that not only engages the voter, like that individual person, but then you can engage all the people that those people are able to connect with in their lives. And that has a cascading groundswell effect to, one, win more elections, and two, maybe actually by 2029, like we're saying, have the majorities needed to actually do some of these things in Congress. Yeah. But I think if we wait till after the midterms and we wait until we're in the general election or primary season for the 2028, like I think we're losing too much of a head start we could be getting on Republicans.
So I think that policy agenda is a fucking dynamite winner, and the 2028 nominee should absolutely run on those things. I agree that you're giving me, I think, realistic win conditions here, because I do think you can accomplish a lot of that in the next Congress. That does sound plausible to me.
But I think you got like the reason I brought some of these up is like immigration is a Republican talking point, right? Democrats need to have a like set policy position on immigration.
I agree.
Well, we already, like, if you asked most Democratic officials, like, or like elected officials, I think they're going to give you something similar to a merit or skill based, like changing meter on like who and what like type of person gets into the country, like what skills they have, whatever. So like we need to be like telling people that that's what Democrats believe in now, so that when Democrats start, like elected officials or candidates start telling people this stuff in 2 or 3 years, like they're not like, oh, what the hell? Like, how come you weren't saying this 5 years ago?
I agree that the Democrats need to, because it's kind of vague what Kamala ran on, because
I agree.
She was like pro border security, but she was also running on, pathway to citizenship for people that have not committed crimes, and I'd have to look at the rest of her immigration policy, but she was it was like a pro immigrant, but they need to find a way to like change the narrative. And by fleshing things out more in the way that you're describing, then I think that might go a long way. I don't know.
What do you think about a general Democratic narrative that is these types of policies that most people agree with, but especially liberals like you and I, we agree on these things. Why don't we just take these policies and just say, these are the things we believe in, and these are why these systems, like the Republicans, fight against these things, and here's why. And here's all the evidence of the things that they've been doing of why they're fighting against these systems or these reforms or these laws that help you, but they don't want. Because it's clear, like you and I can both sit here and talk for 30 minutes about all the reasons Republicans don't want these things. Like the elected officials, why they don't want these things. But the voters do want these things.
Can you help me understand what this has to do with like the Democrats also running on accountability for Trump or whatever?
Yeah. So like, okay, the digital privacy and AI privacy, I think is a great, like a specific example to get into. So Trump clearly has had negotiations or conversations with big tech, and especially in the AI language model like industry, about not reforming or doing any sort of regulations on the industry, because that will make their lives much more difficult and much more costly. So they are saying like, we are not going to regulate you at all, and then you're going to give me money or some form of compensation. Seems like donations or whatever.
Okay.
Right? Like that seems to be clear. So we can tailor like the digital privacy, AI privacy into like a fight against the corruption that the MAGA and whoever
I see what you're doing. Yeah,
are committing, and then tie it to that. And then so like we get a policy win, we get a messaging win, and we attack them on something that like people like, I think a lot of people are scared of AI and like digital privacy rights being lost. And I think that's like a slam dunk, like fully encompassing position.
You're pushing a kind of like, 2 or 3 birds with one stone kind of situation.
Yeah, and I think that's what we need to be doing. But
that's
like
really efficient. But wait, hold on.
Yeah.
But what does what does that have to do with? I don't understand what we disagree on yet, because how does this factor into, or do we disagree? Is that what the point of the conversation was?
I don't know. You disagree with me before, and I just came with more evidence and more examples to try to convince you this time around.
Well, what you're describing to me now is different from, I as president will direct my DOJ to investigate Donald Trump.
I mean, that wasn't the encompassing of all of my argument last time, but that was maybe a very small fraction of it. And I agree from our last conversation, we should not be messaging on like federal elected officials like targeting Republicans. That's a losing stance, I believe.
Broadly, but I think like congressional candidates have more leeway because the Congress.
I agree. That's their job.
The Congress, exactly. Yeah.
What I think I guess the heart of our disagreement before was, I think for the American electorate to both be willing to go along with these things and to believe that that our candidates actually care about these things means that we have to start presenting these things to our electorate or us, like the broader electorate now. And so like, you don't have to be saying like Trump is using AI companies to fund, all the crazy glamorous things he wants in the White House and the ballroom and all this crap. You can save that for when you're actually running an election, like actually campaigning. But like right now we need to be telling people AI is scary. There's it's a black hole. We don't know how we're going to come out on the other side of this thing. Yeah. And so like we need to be setting up protections to protect people who just want to live their lives.
I think that will be more at the forefront by the time we get to 2028. I don't know how relevant AI is going to be to campaigns in 2026, but we are rapidly approaching a period of intense disruption.
But you would agree that like Talarico in Texas could have run on like some immigration platform, like a modern immigration platform, and that would be relevant for his race.
I imagine immigration will come up in the context of that Senate race, and we'll see how he messages on that. But he didn't run on immigration stuff in the primary because it's just a different kind of contest. But I actually don't know what his immigration policies are concretely. I think I understand them abstractly, but I don't know what specific policy prescriptions he's gonna come out with. Does he have a platform page quite yet? I don't know if he does. I imagine that'll change in the next month, and we'll get a better sense of the kind of campaign he's going to run, the kind of policies he's going to push for. But
okay, Yeah, cool. That was what I wanted to talk about. So I'm glad. It seems like we have a lot of agreement, which is good. I think this is a correct sentiment to be bringing to liberal media.
I really love those ideas. Unironically, I think those are great. Like, you know,
you've helped me think about it more in a like, how can we get functional, real things that help people in front of people, and that like will get broad support that we can champion. So.
Yeah, I could tell you thought about it and fleshed it out, because I mean those are good ideas. Yeah, anytime you can pitch a policy that is going to, you know, do really well with the voters and have a lot of popularity, and at the same time have it be like jabs at the administration or jabs at the Republican Party, then I think that's like super ideal. I mean, that's like a really great situation. So yeah, anyways, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yep. Later, man.
Bye-bye. Hello.
Hi, Hutch. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, your mic is not great, but I can hear you.
For sure. Sorry about that. So I actually agree with you regarding the debate you've been having for the past week or so, regarding Trump and how far Democrats should go. So I was hoping I could really quickly touch on something different, if that's okay.
Yeah. Well, actually, do you mind if I do some call outs real quick?
Sure.
All right. Michael with $2. Good combo. Hey, cheers, buddy. Thank you. Michael with $5. A set policy position on immigration. This feels ironically vague in a big messy tent. How to calculate pros and cons of levels of policy prescription. Well, listen, I mean, hey, that's a challenge, but the presidential nominee, they're gonna have broad latitude to decide what the platform is going to be. And so it's going to, you know, it's not going to be enough for a lot of people in the coalition. It's going to piss a lot of them off. And a lot of that has to do with what you guys are seeing on the screen right now. There's this poll that came out, I think yesterday, from the Manhattan Institute, which, as I understand, is a conservative pollster. But, you know, they put out their methodology. I'll ask Laksha what he thinks about these numbers, but they came up with some pretty interesting kind of analyses of where the party is right now that I want to dive into after I have this conversation with you. Emrys with the tier 1 membership. Thank you. Michael with another $5. What's up? Serenity Hulk Hutch. I don't know what that means. Hi, boy. Thanks so much for 20 months. Benny Johnson with 8 months. How to do it? I think I already got you. All right, go ahead. Go for it.
Yeah, so quick background. I am a former Hassan viewer. I would say that I was a very casual Hassan viewer, but I turned hard against him after he refused to endorse Kamala. That was really unforgivable to me. You know, I believe in harm reduction. I think it's the bare minimum to vote for the best candidate.
Yep.
I started watching you on election night. That was the first Hutch stream I ever watched. And something I really, really like about you is that you are very pragmatic. And I love that you are such a strong advocate for vote blue no matter who. I think most progressives and soc Dems probably do end up voting blue no matter who, even though they might whine about it. But a lot of them still need to hear that. And I try to argue with these people as well. I think the problem is that a lot of these lefties, they have a really hard time contending with Biden's Gaza policy. And so I'm just wondering, would you say that Biden's Gaza policy was pretty bad?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's nuance.
Sure.
Like, I think it's not some easy, simple thing to unwind decades of foreign policy and alienate Israel. There are practical considerations, like they have a lot of our fucking secrets. You know,
Sure.
that's
Sure.
like that's just a practical concern. And then also there is an argument to make for making some kind of effort to maintain a relationship with them, maintain a strategic partnership, even if they're fucking doing war crimes. Because
I would agree.
Within the capacity of like, within the context of like that relationship, Biden was able to, and the State Department were able to, you know, influence them in two ways that stick out to me that I think were really good. Number one was like pushing them to allow humanitarian aid into the country. That literally happened because Biden pushed for it. And what would Gaza have looked like if there was just no aid that went into the country the whole time? That's pretty catastrophic to think about it. And then the offensive into Rafah, they pushed the Israelis to allow for civilians to be relocated before they went in there. And that potentially saved tens of thousands of lives. Israel, their whole thing was like, no, we got them cornered. We're down to Hamas's last 2 cells. And, they're in Rafah and we're just going to get in there and finish the job. And Biden and the State Department successfully pushed them to allow for, I think it was over 1 million civilians to be relocated. And so, that only happened because we had a relationship with Israel. That only happened because we didn't alienate them. So these are complicated, nuanced discussions is my point.
No, I understand. And I would never say, a lot of lefties act like Biden never conditioned aid. And he did. He did condition aid. He did pause, shipments of weapons. But I think he should have been willing to do that way more and for way more. And I think other Democrats would have been willing to kind of pull the leash a lot more than Biden, specifically, who's historically like one of the most pro-Israel people like in American politics, right?
I mean, I don't know about the last part, but I agree with everything else you said.
Yeah, so basically all I really wanted to say is, I'm not sure how concerned you are with winning these people over, but I think, the problem with them is when they're talking to a lib, they kind of plug their ears because in their mind, liberals can't even admit that Biden did anything bad.
Yeah, well, they're Hassan viewers, and so Hassan and
but I think even non-Hassan viewers, even people who are just socially progressive, social democrats that aren't super plugged in online, I think they also kind of have that view, and I think that way for a reason, I think.
Well, what I mean when I say like, well, they're Hassan viewers, so that's not surprising. That's what so Hassan, instead of he's much less comfortable defending the merits of his arguments against people that challenge those takes. And so instead what he does is not so subtly, I mean, this is just his modus operandi, like this is just how he works, is he will instead find a way to discredit those people in the eyes of his audience. And so he'll use all kinds of different labels. So liberal, they use that as like a pejorative, Zionist, Destiny Orbiter. There's like 7 different things. Hassan hater, jealous, chorus paid, paid Israeli. So he'll slap these labels on people in an effort to kind of condition his audience to just like dismiss what people have to say without having to actually do the work of listening to those arguments and coming up with sound reasons for why they're wrong. You can just skip all that if you just say, well, they're Zionists, so I don't have to listen to them.
Yeah, and that is a huge problem. And I think I've seen that more and more since I've kind of gotten out of that world. But all I was really wanted to say was that I think you could get a lot of the more casual, progressive, sock them, pro-Gaza people to listen to you if you are kind of willing to admit that, Biden's Gaza policy is kind of a moral stain on our party. I've said that it is going to have to be reckoned with eventually.
I mean, I've said that the whole time. That's been my position the whole time. So maybe I should say it more. I don't know, but I've literally said probably those exact words. Like the Gaza thing was a moral stain on it. Otherwise like excellent presidency in my opinion. The Gaza issue and his decision to stay in the race and push Kamala to prioritize his legacy over her winning the election, I think were 2 big stains on his presidency that complicate the analysis of how he was as a president. But, I've been saying that the whole time.
Well, that's great. That's really awesome. That's another reason to admire you. I would say that I've noticed that a lot of Democrats, even kind of centrist-y Democrats, are kind of subtly signaling that by, using the word war crimes, even if they don't use the word genocide, or refusing to take AIPAC money, signaling that they will be firmer with Israel. And I think you're going to see a lot of that in this upcoming primary. And I think whoever we see in the general is also going to be doing those kinds of things. So, I do think we have a reason to be hopeful.
I think the Israel problem is going to be talked about a lot in the primary. I don't know how much Israel is going to be talked about in the general when it's like candidate Kamala or candidate Newsom versus Rubio or Vance. I don't know if there's going to be an enormous focus on Israel, but I do think that because Israel has become such a divisive issue, the media will, the media is invested in conflict and getting as many clicks as they want. I mean, so are YouTubers for that matter and streamers, and so they're going to ask a lot of questions about Israel on the debate stage and in interviews because they're going to be playing into that conflict. And I think Israel is for sure like the most divisive issue or the most incendiary issue in Democratic Party politics right now. But then once the primaries are over, I don't know how much, I don't know, we'll see, but I don't know how much Israel is going to be discussed in the general or focused on.
Yeah, maybe. But I also feel like it'll probably get brought up on a debate, between the Democrat and the Republican candidate. But, you're right. Yeah, that's pretty much all I got for you. Thanks for talking with me.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. I did want to go over this survey, you guys. So the methodology is between February 6th and 15th, 2026. So just about a month ago, actually, the Manhattan Institute surveyed 3 separate national audiences, 1,782 registered Democrats and or 2024 Harris voters, 828 Black Democrats and or 2024 Harris voters, and 388 Hispanic Democratic and or 2024 Harris voters. The sample was reached via online panels and SMS to web, which was 625 interviews. While also reported separately, the Black, Hispanic, and general Democrat voters were merged into one national Democrat sample and weighted to reflect Democrats nationwide on gender, education, age, ethnicity, density, and region. When referred to specifically, Black and Hispanic voters are treated as separate unweighted examples. For 2028 presidential primary questions, answers were filtered to a sample of 1,494 likely voters based on whether they said they were extremely or very likely to vote in the 2028 Democratic presidential primaries. The margin of error is plus or minus 2.3% for the general Democrat sample, plus or minus 3.4% for the Black sample, and plus or minus 5% for the Hispanic sample. The margin of error for 2028 presidential primary questions is 2.5%. Again, I'm going to speak to Laksha on Thursday, so I'm going to ask him about this poll because I'm sure he's aware of it by now. Again, I looked it up, and I think what I found was that the Manhattan Institute has a conservative bias. So to what extent that influenced these results, I don't know. I do see a lot of people that I respect and think are intelligent in my feed treating this poll with, seriousness. General Grievous with $5. There is no point at all in ceding ground to the Biden bad leftists. It's not to say Biden was perfect, but the pro-Gaza leftist wing cannot be satisfied. Well, listen, I mean, the Biden bad leftists, I don't think the Democratic Party should invest literally a single dime in appealing to those people. I think they are just so toxic and corrosive. All right. Anyways, as a result of this survey, they came up with a 3-tiered wing of the Democratic Party coalition. You have moderates, which represent about 47% of the Democratic coalition. These are voters who describe themselves as moderate Democrat, independent, or anti-Trump Republican. Moderates form the largest segment of the coalition with an average age of 53. They are somewhat more likely to be non-college graduates and are demographically diverse. 62% white, 17% black, 13% Hispanic, and 5% Asian. More than half live in suburban communities, and they are the most electorally flexible faction in the coalition. Only 45% say they have never voted for a non-democratic presidential candidate. Then you have progressive liberals. That's the label I would give myself, by the way. 37% of the Democratic coalition. Voters who describe themselves as a liberal Democrat or a progressive Democrat. I mean, I use the specific language progressive liberal. Progressive liberals are similar in age, averaging 52 years old. They are the whitest, with 65% white, 11% Hispanic, 17% black, 5% Asian of the three groups, and are evenly split between those with a college degree and those without. A large majority describe themselves as ideologically left-leaning. This group is also disproportionately concentrated on the West Coast and in suburban areas. I believe that. I believe the Bay Area and the Los Angeles County, and also like Seattle, Portland. Yeah. And then you have the woke fringe, which represents 11% of the Democratic coalition. Voters who describe themselves as democratic socialist or communist. The woke fringe stands apart demographically and attitudinally. It is the youngest faction with an average age of 43 and 7 in 10 members under the age of 50. It is the group with the fewest Hispanics, 6%, but the largest proportion of black, 22%, and Asian, 7%. 60% are white. This group is more likely to live in urban areas, particularly in the Northeast. Ideologically, it is the most consistently left-leaning faction, with a majority identifying as very left-leaning. Members of this group are also significantly more likely than other Democrats to report poor mental health, 25%, compared to other groups, 14% for moderates, 16% for progressive liberals. Well, that makes sense. That makes sense. It's interesting to get these numbers. Like, I don't know if we've seen like these kind of very specific numbers. I don't know if I'm surprised. I don't know if I'm surprised. I don't know if this surprises me. That the woke fringe represents 11% of the Democratic coalition. I think maybe it surprises me directionally in the way that, in the sense that I thought maybe it would be a little smaller, but you know, this is like marginal difference. I've been guessing that this kind of wing of the party is probably between like 4 and 8%. And it's just a little bit bigger, 11%. Does this number surprise you guys? Or did you think it would be smaller or bigger? The woke fringe? That is the article. Yes, Cherry. Yeah. You thought it would be bigger? That number makes me feel like Hassan had a bigger influence on the election than he says. See, I don't know. See, like, how many of, like, what percentage of the woke fringe are regular Hassan viewers? I don't know if it's going to be that high. I mean, you know. I guess we can just do the math here. Hang on. What is the raw total amount of... Well, I guess we can just look at the last election, right? Just look at the voters. Like, how many people voted in 2024 for the Democrats? Was it close to like 72 million or something? Or no, it was lower than that, was it? Oh, 75 million. It was about 75 million. All right. Wait, that seems like a lot. Is that more than like Barack Obama got in his second term? All right, so 75 million. And then you have 11% of 75 million. So if I do 75 million times 0.11 would be 8.2 million people. Do we have a sense of Hassan's like regular viewers / like people that engage with him on social media? Like regular viewers he has? I don't know what that number is. I don't know what his like unique number, like unique viewers each month. I don't know. On Twitch. In terms of regular viewers, I think that's going to be well under 1 million. I don't know. I really don't. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But they asked some questions that I think have been really hitting on like a lot of the discourse since 2024. So for example, this question says, thinking about the direction of the Democratic Party after 2024, which statement comes closest to your view? So there's 4 options. First option, Democratic Party needs to move further to the left to energize its base. Then you have the Democratic Party is right in the right spot ideologically. And then you have not sure. And then you have the Democratic Party needs to move towards the center to win over more voters. And among all Democrats / Harris voters, a plurality, 38%, say the Democratic Party needs to move towards the center to win over more voters, with only 22% saying the Democratic Party needs to move further to the left to energize its base. I can't speak right now. It's base. Iran is planning to mine the Strait of Hormuz. Good golly, Josh. Interesting. Jesus Christ. 35% of Hispanic voters say that Democrats need to move towards the center. 39% of black voters, or black Democrats, think that Democrats need to move towards the center, versus 41% of white voters, 53% of moderates. Under 50, it's actually even Stevens. For all Democrats under 50, 31% think that the party needs to move to the left, and 31% thinks that the party needs to move to the center. 44% of 50 plus, and I think this is like kind of the more crucial, like people over 50 just vote in much higher percentages. And among the most engaged Democrats, 50 plus, 44% say the Democrats need to move towards the center, versus only 15% of 50 plus say the party needs to move further to the left. If you force me to answer this question, I would probably pick, move towards the center, just from a purely pragmatic position here. When we look at the 2028 hopefuls, first of all, there is a lack of like super progressive people. Like Ro Khanna is pretty progressive, but it's a kind of a mixed bag with him a little bit. I mean, obviously, like Jon Stewart would be progressive. I don't know why he's coming up in these polls. I don't think he's going to run. AOC is really kind of the only one I would say that the woke fringe would approve of, and a lot of them would not approve of her. And then everybody else right now seems to be kind of more traditionally like progressive liberals / moderates. That's just something that I've noticed with the polling this time around. Is like there really aren't a lot of like right now like really progressive candidates that are in the discussion about 2028. Have you guys noticed that? It felt like 2020 people were like, you know, you had Kamala kind of attacking the Bernie flank, like going for that same lane. You had Elizabeth Warren, you had Bernie, you had Julian Castro, you know, that's 4 right there out of like the, you know, back then, fucking Tulsi was, a lot of people still considered her progressive, but now it's just one. Like there's just like one AOC, and I don't even know if she's gonna run. You know, like I don't even know. If I had to guess, I would say she's probably gonna go for that Senate seat before, but I really have no idea. And then we had some more kind of realistic, concrete numbers here. So in a 4-way matchup, Kamala, Gavin, Shapiro, and AOC, you know, all 4 of those people I would say are like plausible in terms of will they run, will they not run? And, yeah, you know, 33% Kamala, 28% Newsom. He's still technically behind her, but within striking distance. And I think he's positioned quite well to put himself out there in ways that she can't really compete with. You know, him being governor of California just gives him all kinds of just lanes for him to like get his name recognition up and make headlines. And Shapiro at 16%, AOC at 13%. So like between, you know, if you put all these candidates together and you just kind of just, you all call them sort of more traditional Democrats. I mean, you know, I'm not seeing right now like a really firm progressive candidate lane. Between these numbers and these numbers, I don't think the odds are very great for a super progressive candidate in 2028. That could change, to be clear. That could change. I'm not saying it won't change. But not the widest lane right now. If it's just Harris versus Newsom, Harris only has a 2-point advantage. And if it's Newsom versus AOC, Newsom almost has her doubled. Like it's like a, what is that, a net 23, 25? 25? Newsom has a net plus 25. Now again, like, so again, none of this is set in stone. Barack Obama was a massive, my understanding was that Barack Obama was quite a dark horse in 2008. Am I wrong about that? I think he was polling at like 2% when he started. And so you never know. You really never know. Just forgetting Mamdani. Mamdani cannot run. He is not a natural born citizen, right? Amongst the Democratic Party, the figures with the highest approval ratings, like net, are Barack Obama. That's not really all that shocking. I mean, I think this is a really telling statistic right here, guys, because I feel like in many ways, the answer to this question tells you right away. How do I describe this? I think this, like how you answer, like, do you think Barack Obama was good or bad? This number right here, these are the lefties that I'm constantly talking about. Does that make sense? The really toxic ones. maybe that's generalizing a bit, you know, because people might have different reasons for not liking Obama. Maybe they didn't like the Snowden stuff and mass surveillance, and maybe they didn't like how he didn't go far enough on, they feel like he should have done more for healthcare, or they didn't like drone strikes. I mean, there's a few different reasons, but like, if you're saying yes, that Barack Obama was pretty good, all of us, like nobody that says Barack Obama was like good or pretty good, like none of the like hardcore lefties that I fucking constantly fight with, none of them are going to say that Barack Obama was a good president, okay? All of them are going to be like, are you fucking kidding me? He was just as bad as Bush. So even within the woke fringe, like I think you have to break that group down. So I think the 6% number gives us a sense of like, these are the people that are watching Kyle Kalinske. These are the people that are watching Hassan. These are the people that are watching Majority Report. These are the people that are watching, you know, the far, far lefty types, you know. You guys disagree with that assessment? I mean, maybe that's a bit imprecise, but. Like, do you guys know in 2016, what question was asked that the answer to that question most accurately predicted how they were going to vote in 2016? This is just a weird fact that I remember about 2016. Can you guys guess what it was? I don't know if that's a confusing question. When people were asked, was Donald Trump born in the United States? The ones who answered no, like almost all of them voted for Donald Trump. And so like that ended up being, yeah, it was a birther thing. That ended up being the most predictive question, which is crazy. And I think in a way, this like asking Democrats, people within the Democratic Party coalition, if they think Barack Obama was good or bad, the ones that say he was bad, these are the ones that are, you know, these are the problem children. Okay. These are like the arsonists. And it really has nothing to do with like the actual question of, is he good or bad? That's not even the point that I'm making, I think. I just think this is going to be more predictive. Barack Obama had the highest approval rating, plus 85 net among Democrats. The Democratic Party right now, 82% say that they think that the Democratic Party is favorable right now. That's actually a little surprising. Thought it would be lower than that. I thought it would be much lower than that right now. Kamala Harris, similar, actually identical numbers. So Kamala Harris, 82% of Democrats have a favorable view of her versus 15% that don't. AOC, these numbers are not surprising to me. Like she has pretty strong favorables, and there's going to be a lot of people that are unsure of her. But, you know, strong numbers. Newsom is just a little bit behind AOC nationally, actually. They have the same unfavorable, but he has 2 points less favorable. Jon Stewart, I don't even like people asking him. I don't like, why are we talking about Jon Stewart running for president? It's not going to happen. Mamdani, decent numbers for somebody who's like just getting started here. Pretty decent numbers. Maddow, you know, starting to get a little bit less and less. Josh Shapiro, I mean, this is kind of surprising to me. I mean, maybe it's because him and Kamala have been sparring with each other, and because people view her to be quite favorably still in the party, maybe they don't like that he's fighting with her. But Josh Shapiro is very well liked in Pennsylvania. Ezra Klein, no surprise here that the vast majority of Democrats have not even heard of Ezra Klein. 18% approve of his message, 13% don't like him. Hassan Piker, you guys. According to Manhattan Institute, Hassan Piker, about 27% of the country know of him to one degree or another. That's a little shocking to me. I mean, I guess maybe not. I don't know. Maybe not. He's all over these platforms. He's getting fucking cushy ass interviews. He's done a good job. Say what you will about Hassan, but he's done a really good job of getting his fucking name out there in the last couple of years, for sure. Immigration. This is a really important issue for Democrats going into 2028, guys. Really important issue. Democrats are going to be asked tough questions. Every Democrat on every debate stage are going to be asked, what are you going to do that was different from what Biden did? They're all going to be asked this question. And they're going to like target the center. I promise you. I promise you. I promise you. We are a long ways from Julian Castro in 2020 saying he would decriminalize border crossings. Okay. We are so far removed from that. So the question is regarding illegal immigration. Which statement comes closest to your view? And there's 5 options. First option is, after years of open borders, there are so many illegal immigrants that our top priority should be deporting as many as possible by whatever methods are necessary. Guys, 29% of Democrats, 4% agree with that. Including 6% of the woke fringe, 3% of progressive liberals, 3% of moderates. The next option is, we need to significantly reduce the number of illegal immigrants, but this must be done carefully with due process so innocent people aren't wrongfully detained or deported. That is 25% of all voters, 18% of the woke fringe, 23% of progressive liberals, and 29% of moderates. The next option is, many illegal immigrants have lived peacefully since their initial violation. We should focus on deporting serious criminals, not families or otherwise law-abiding residents. That would be my view, for what it's worth. That is a majority of the party, 54%. 45% of the woke fringe, 58% of progressive liberals, 56% of moderates. That is like the majority position within the party. And then we have another option which says we shouldn't be focused on deporting illegal immigrants at all. That is only 11% of the population, or 11% of the Democrats. It is 24% of the woke fringe, 12% of progressive liberals, and 7% of moderates. And then the rest are the other options are not sure. So this to me seems like, I think we're probably going to get some kind of like whoever the nominee becomes in 2028, it's probably going to be kind of a middle ground between these two things, if I had to guess. It'll signal some like more kind of like tough on border security. I think it's going to look like Kamala's 2024 policy, immigration policy. Or you want more immigrants, but like tougher border security or something. Thinking about legal immigration to the United States, should the number of immigrants allowed to enter legally each year? And the options are increase, stay the same, not sure, and decrease. 23% of all Democrats want more immigration. Put me in that camp. Woke fringe, it's about 40% of them. Progressive liberals, about 27% of them. And 16% of moderates think that we should increase immigration. A plurality of Democrats think that the immigration levels should stay about the same, which includes 33% of woke fringe, 44% of progressive liberals, and 50% of moderates. As far as the amount of Democrats who think we should decrease immigration, that represents 16% of Democrats, 11% of the woke fringe, 14% of progressive liberals, and 20% of moderates. So the clear winner here is stay about the same. Transgenderism. Do you believe that athletes under the age of 18 who say they are transgender should play on sports teams of the gender that matches their sex at birth or the gender they currently choose to identify with. A plurality of Democrats say that these athletes should compete as the gender or against in the classification, whatever, the gender that matches their sex at birth. 46% versus 34% who say the gender they currently identify with, and 20% who say not sure. Honestly, put me in the not sure category. Is it okay to just say that this is not something that I think about or should be forced to think about? I don't even, why are we? It is kind of comical. We're talking about something that affects maybe like 15 people in the entire country. For moderates, it's 56% think that it should be the gender that matches the sex at birth, versus 41% of progressive liberals, versus 23% of the woke fringe, 48% of black voters, 43% of white Democrats, 39% of Hispanic Democrats. For 50 plus, it's 48% versus 28%. And under 50, it is 44%. Just a slight plurality, actually. At what age do you believe a person should be allowed to receive transgender medical interventions? This is kind of a bit of a complicated way to frame the question, because I think people hear that and their minds go to like gender reassignment surgery or medication. But medical intervention could just mean like therapy, socially transitioning. I don't even know like the average age they give to people for to get to adolescents for puberty blockers. I don't even know. I would guess it's around like 12, but I have no idea. And I just defer to the experts on this one. And anytime I ever looked at like the benefits of doing social transitioning at a young age were numerous and very pronounced. Kids that began the process of transitioning at young ages that had the support of their family and their peers had way less instances of thoughts of self-harm or self-unaliving, lower rates of depression, and that kind of makes sense on its face. But, I think the issue here is that it's difficult to get really well-funded like studies on these kinds of things because it impacts such a low percentage of the population. So I imagine it's difficult to get funding to like look into these things. But it seems like the most popular answer to this question, but it's a bit complicated, is between the ages of 18 to 20. Kind of similar numbers for all these groups, except for the woke fringe, but that's not very surprising. A lot of not sures, which I think is a perfectly reasonable answer. Because I've done some cursory research on this shit, but by no means would I ever claim to have a confident grasp of like when it is appropriate. But certainly it is fringe within the party that younger than 13. That's very, very fringe. Even in the woke fringe, that's very, very fringe. Again, I don't know. I think the question itself is a bit loaded. To receive transgender medical interventions, does that necessarily mean medication, puberty blockers, hormone replacement therapy, surgery? I don't think so. When we say medical interventions, that could just mean like therapy and socially transitioning, I think. What is medicine? Well, let me just hold on. Let's ask Copilot. What do people generally mean when they say medical intervention? Could this include things like therapy for a child with gender dysphoria? Therapy and socially transitioning, we'll say, and socially transitioning. I feel like so many people want to have it both ways on this argument as well, because like they'll say stuff like, oh no, you can't do puberty blockers. That's way too scary and wrong. But then if a trans girl goes through male puberty, you know what I mean? Doesn't it feel like people want it both ways here? Medical intervention typically includes medication, surgery, medical devices, clinical therapies, psychological or psychiatric treatments. Does medical intervention include therapy? Yes. Okay, I don't know. I don't love the way that this question was phrased. I think it's a bit ambiguous. I think if you ask normies this question, all of them are going to think like pills and surgery. I don't think I'm wrong about that. I think like probably 80% of the country, they hear the question and they're like surgery and pills. But I don't think that's true. Which statement comes closest to your view? And there's 4 options here. The US has a long history of racism and is still a very racist country today. Second option is the US has a long history of racism, but it has made a lot of progress and is much less racist today. What's interesting to me about these two questions is that they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. You can believe that the country is still very racist, but also believe that we made a lot of progress and is much less racist. So I guess it's just a vibe check. And then a third option, the US was racist in the past, but is no longer a racist country. 52% of the party said the US has a long history of racism and is still a very racist country today. Versus 39% who said the US has a long history of racism but has made a lot of progress and is much less racist today. I mean, for what it's worth, I would choose this one. I would say we have a long history of racism, but we've made a lot of progress and is much less racist today. But I'm fucking old. I am fucking old, and I remember media from the 90s. I remember, bro, it was not, oh my God. It was like, I remember being a kid and there was a guy doing repairs on the home that I lived in, or maybe he was painting. And I don't even want to tell you the story. It's pretty embarrassing. I mean, I was a kid. What do you want me to do? I was a kid. And I couldn't like, you know, I spent most of my time around white people. My family was white. I have a sister that's black. That's a long story. Not going to get into it. But she moved away when I was like 3. And so I don't have a lot of memories. She went to go live with her mom, which on the East Coast. And I was like 2 or 3 when she left. And I remember looking at this guy. I would have been like 6 or 7. And I remember asking him, like, what are you? And I meant, like, are you white? Are you black? Are you, you know? And I remember him describing himself as like mulatto, which that's a phrase that doesn't get used anymore. Just like this kid, I was just this kid who just had no filter and just asked whatever popped into my head. And, but you know, that's like kind of normal kid behavior or whatever. But like, and then when I asked like what that was, it was like something that was like, whoa, you know. But just attitudes on interracial relationships, that's the thing that I focus on the most when I think about the progress that we've made. Let me just look up a Gallup poll. Gallup poll, interracial marriage. I mean, this is just an insane, like really insane, like this, we changed so much as a society in the 21st, especially in the 21st century. You know, there are lots of metrics to consider, but this is the thing that just, like, I'm old enough to remember, you know, like when, I wonder what happened here. What happened here, you guys? Between 1995 and 1997. The fuck happened? Maybe a movie? When did Remember the Titans come out? It came out in the year 2000. Nope, that wasn't it. Was it the Spice Girls? I mean, yeah, it was the Clinton years, but like, what happened? Like, something had to have happened. Like, what caused that? The first black president, that's not until like over here, bro. What the fuck happened here, man? Something caused this. I don't know what this is. Is it the arts? Or maybe, yeah, you know what? Maybe, you know what? The 90s, they were like the LA riots and the OJ trial, like forced like a national conversation about race. Maybe that was it. But that's kind of like counterintuitive when you think about it. Like, support for interracial marriage goes up after OJ trial. Like, that seems kind of counterintuitive. Michael Jackson. Fuck. I think you're right. I think you're right, man. I think literally this was Michael Jackson. You guys have no idea how fucking big Michael Jackson was in the 90s, bro. You have no idea. When did the music video for Black or White come out? If you're thinking about my baby, it don't matter if you're black or white. That was the first album I ever bought. No. I'm sorry. The first album I was ever given. It was a cassette tape of that Michael Jackson album that I wish I could fucking listen to, because holy shit, that album slapped. Just one of the greatest musical albums of all time, and I can't fucking listen to it because he was a fucking pedophile, and it just doesn't hit the same. What was the name of that album? Michael Jackson. What was the name of that album? Was it Dangerous? Fuck. What was the name of the album? Was it 1992? Okay, wait. Then we're way off. That came out in 91. What the fuck happened here? I literally think this was just a combination of factors. And I think the arts played a huge role in this, you guys, because there was a period in the 90s where it just started, these movies started coming out that were like aggressively confronting the topic of race. I think this is just a cultural swing, like largely pushed by the arts, but I really don't know. I mean, this is kind of strange. This makes me think that there was like a Supreme Court decision, or maybe there was like a fucking, I don't even know. Let's ask Copilot. Hang on. I'm looking at a Gallup poll asking Americans, or a Gallup poll showing Americans become more accepting of interracial marriage over the years. There is a spike in approval picking up that happened between 1995 and 1997. Were there any notable historical events that took place during that time that could explain this spike? Coach Carter? Was it the movie Coach Carter? Approval for interracial marriage rose steadily for decades, but the sharp jump between 95 and 97 stands out because no single clear-cut national event directly explains this. Actually, the first thing it jumps to is what I'm talking about. So cultural visibility and media influence. The mid-90s saw a noticeable rise in mainstream portrayals of interracial relationships. While not tied to a single watershed moment, this period included more interracial couples appearing in TV shows, films, and advertising, normalizing the idea for a broad audience, broader shift in entertainment towards diverse casts and storylines. Yeah, I'm telling you guys, man, I keep saying these, I feel like I've talked about it so much, but I feel like the arts are such an important part of the fucking... We're talking about conversations these days about how politicians can just like change everybody's minds about things. But the arts are so fucking important. It just makes perfect sense that people started to see more interracial couples on TV shows and in movies. And it just, you know, as with anything, like when something is stigmatized, you become less and less afraid of the thing or uncomfortable with the thing, the more you're exposed to it. I remember seeing Brokeback Mountain in theaters on a date with a woman whom I had sexual relations with after the film. That was the first time I saw two dudes kiss. And boy, did it go further than that. He's fucking licking his hand and lubing up his cock with his spit before he fucked Jake Gyllenhaal in the ass. I was like, whoa, you know, and that was the first time I ever saw like a sex scene or kissing or anything in media. And nowadays, bro, it's like a fifth of Netflix content. And the first time I saw it, I was like, what is happening? I don't understand this. I wouldn't say I was uncomfortable, but I was maybe uncomfortable. I was like, I've never seen this before. Wow. They do that too? It was like, well, yeah, I guess that makes sense. The gay people lick their hands too. And then, you know, that was like this big thing. There's a Haktua on that thing, yeah. And then now I see a gay couple on a TV show or a movie that we're watching, and it like nothing pops into my head. Nothing whatsoever. I just got fucking used to it. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's like the same thing with this. I think there were so many movies that came out in the 90s that were like exploring black trauma and really making an effort to, you know, normalize or destigmatize interracial relationships. But anyways, I don't know how we got caught on that one. Okay. I don't know, man. Like I think Trump is probably the reason why. I think if the American public, I think if we elected Kamala Harris, for example, in 2028, then I think the numbers for this one are going to go way up. Like a lot of progress has been made and is much less racist today. And these numbers are going to go way down. The US has a long history of racism and is still a very racist country today. I think Donald Trump being president is making Democrats more pessimistic, I guess, in their framing, or more negative in their framing. But I think it's just objectively true that, the US has a long history of racism, but has made a lot of progress and is much less racist today. I mean, that is just objectively true. The folks who experience racism the most still think the country is racist. Well, yeah, not super surprising there. Overall, do you believe the founding of the United States has been mostly a force for good in the world? Among all Democrats, 64%, a very clear majority, 64% say that America has been mostly a force for good in the world. Put me in this camp, by the way. Even with all the Cold War shenanigans and the CIA coups, I think that America having our revolution and establishing our democracy has inspired a lot of other countries to adopt their own liberal democracies. Among Democrats, 19% of Democrats say that the U.S. has been mostly a force for harm in the world. I think this is another one of those bellwether questions. Like the Obama question before, I think like within this group, what percentage of this group, watch Hassan regularly, right? Even a plurality, you guys, and now this is kind of surprising. Even a plurality of the woke fringe say that America's been mostly a force for good. 28% say they're not sure versus 35% say mostly a force for harm in the world. I think this is wait, hang on. This is the bellwether question right here. This is like the best question because, okay, so we did the math. It was, okay, so 75 million Kamala voters times 0.11 that's 11% for the woke fringe. That's 8.2 million. And then 35% of 8.5 million would be, I did not do this right. Okay, 75 million times 0.11 equals, okay, so 8.25 million. So we'll do 8.25, and then you multiply that by 35%, and you get, what the fuck? I did not 35. Hang on. Times 0.35%. So that's about 2.9 million people. So I think there you go. I think that's the number. And then, but that's just like the voter base, and so we have to expand. We have to expand beyond the voter base. I'm gonna guess it's between like 4 and 5 million people, like America bad leftists. I'm gonna guess it's like between 4 or 5, maybe 6 million people, America bad leftists. Progressive liberals overwhelmingly think that America's been a force for good in the world. 2/3 of progressive liberals, and then with moderates, it's even higher, 71%. Do you agree that the Democratic Party has gotten too radical on social issues and identity politics? Bit of a consensus here. Most of these groups think that they disagree or strongly disagree. With moderates, it's a little bit closer. 39% versus 35. So slight plurality of moderates do think that America has gotten too radical on social issues and identity politics. I don't know how I would answer that question. I don't think the party has gotten too radical. I think it's been particular subsets within the party. So I guess I would say I'd somewhat disagree. Interestingly enough, the woke fringe are the most opposed to this framing. Pretty clear majority of them don't think that the party has gotten too radical. Actually, this is kind of... Actually, no, that's not that surprising. Between men and women, women are slightly less likely to agree with that framing than men. Among the racial groups here, Hispanic voters are most likely to disagree. That's interesting. I think I would have expected different results there. In general, do you think criminal justice system in the United States is too tough, not tough enough, or about right in handling of crime? Now this is interesting, you guys. This seems to be the biggest departure between the woke fringe than the other topics discussed, because the other topics are kind of like the other kind of subgroups here. They're not that far apart from each other. It's the moderates and the fringe. They're the farthest apart from each other. And then everybody else, it's kind of similar-ish numbers. 37% of the woke fringe say that America's too tough. 10% of moderates versus 10% of moderates who think that too tough on crime. 39% of moderates think we're not tough enough on crime versus 16% of woke fringe. That's interesting. Not at all surprising. Not at all surprising. I don't know how I would answer this question. I genuinely don't know. Because I think maybe in some ways we could be tougher, and in other ways less tough. Like I think we could be tougher on like white collar crime. So I mean, I would answer probably not sure on this one. I would cop out and say not sure. Which statement comes closer to your view? Ooh, this is a big question here. So the options are: police are essential. They should remain the primary way communities address crime and maintain public safety. And then the other option, after not sure, is police often do more harm than good. Funding should be shifted toward non-police alternatives such as mental health and social services. So among all Democratic voters, a majority, 55%, think that police are essential. And 34% say police often do more harm than good and kind of do defunding kind of stuff. Again, not a big surprise, but a large disparity between the moderates and the woke fringe. So 65% of moderates say police are essential versus 23% who say they do more harm than good. With the woke fringe, even you have like a third of the woke fringe that think police are essential versus 59% who say they do more harm than good. There's a huge cavern between the age demographics here. People above the age of 50. Among them, it's 65% who say that police are essential. Only 26% say that police often do more harm than good. The thing that you guys have to remember is that If you're old, then you remember how crazy things got in the 60s and the 70s. You remember how bad crime got like in the 80s and the 90s just across the country. Like crime got really bad during that time. You had various rioting and a lot of riots in the 60s and the 70s, and then you had like the Rodney King riots in 92. And so these old school people, they're going to be heavily influenced by their memories of these things. You know, like crime was just like way worse in the 80s and the 90s. And things got a lot better. And so under 50, it's actually even Stevens, you guys. Under 50, it's 43% versus 43%. It's actually even with black voters as well, you guys. 43%, and then 13% say they are not sure. White Democrats, 58% of them said police are essential. Versus 31% who say police often do more harm than good. I don't know, if you force me to choose between these things, I'd see again, like, I don't know. To me, these are not mutually exclusive. These two answers are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Like, you can, at the same time, say police are essential. They should remain the primary way communities address crime and maintain public safety, while at the same time saying, but they often do more harm than good. And so funding should be shifted toward non-police alternatives such as mental health and social services. Like, they're not mutually exclusive. I would agree with both of these things. You know what I mean? So I don't know how to answer this question. I guess I would say not sure. I just don't know. I don't know. The whole point is closer. Where does it say closer? Oh, which statement comes closer to your view? I mean, fuck, man. I don't know how to answer this question. I would honestly say not sure. I'm fucking such a fence rider. Israel. Oh my goodness, you guys. Oh God. I don't even want to read this part. I don't know. Going back to this, it's just like, it is hard because I do believe police are essential, and I do believe that they should remain the primary way that communities address crime and maintain public safety. I very, very, very firmly believe this. And I think that there are. It also depends on like the precincts. Like there's going to be some precincts that just have way worse cultures than others. But I do think that law enforcement in general, I'm a product of social media, and I've just seen so many videos of people that are just so clearly like, I've seen so many videos where I ask myself, how the fuck did this person pass a psychological screening to become a law enforcement officer that we entrust with a gun? Like, how did that happen? Like, there's so many people that I think are attracted to these jobs because they have like violent fantasies. That's just what it seems like to me. Obviously more so these days when it comes to like ICE agents and shit. I have the Jew with $2. That was actually a pretty good MJ riff. Clear Watch with 5 months. Thank you so much for that. La Sherlock with 20 months. Thank you so much for that. All Elite Memes with $5 during the NYC mayoral debate. They asked the candidates who the best president of the modern era was, and Mamdani said FDR. Cuomo said Bill Clinton. I remember that. Mom Donnie said FDR. It's like, come on, bro, you're cheating. What a cheatsy doodle. He picked FDR because otherwise he'd have to say Biden, and if he said Biden, it would piss off his base. That's my theory about that. All elite memes with the tier 1 membership. Which demographic has the most swing voters, though? I would guess like the older demographic, I would guess. Okay. Okay. Anti-Semitism, Israel, and Palestine. Oh God. Oh God. Which of the following most closely reflects your views regarding Israel and Palestine? So there's a few different options here. Israel is a legitimate country facing serious security threats, and while its actions are not perfect, it is largely acting in self-defense. That was about 16% of all voters, all Democratic voters. 7% of the woke fringe versus 19% of moderates. Not a terribly surprising disparity between older and younger voters. So it's only 9% of 18 to 29 versus 17% of 65 plus. Interestingly enough, it's actually Gen X that seemed to be the most pro-Israel. That's fucking interesting. Why is that? Like, why the fuck is that? They haven't seen the footage? Wait, what? Isn't that interesting? I would have assumed that it would have been 65 plus overwhelmingly. Would agree with that one. But for some reason, Gen X is like the most sympathetic to Israel. Huh. Okay. Are you Gen X, Arch? No, I'm millennial. The second intifada? Yeah, I guess. Because they would have been like, yeah, they would have been like young adults when the second intifada popped off. Maybe that's it. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, the second one is Israel has a right to exist, but the government's treatment of Palestinians, both historically and the recent war, is wrong and deserves strong criticism. Yeah, put me firmly in that group. That's 49% of Democrats. Pretty close to a consensus between male and female here. Not too much different there. Not terribly different between black, Hispanic, and white voters. A surprising amount, a plurality of the woke fringe have this view. Graduate, non-graduate, that's not terribly surprising that graduates would have like this view more than non-graduates. And wow, look at this, you guys. 65 plus are most likely to take this one above the other age groups, which are kind of the same. These are very fucking surprising numbers to me, you guys. The narrative that I've been working off of this whole time is like the boomers fucking love Israel, and but these numbers are challenging that assumption. And then the third option is Israel is a colonial apartheid state that must be dismantled. Israel, not the Palestinians, bears responsibility for any and all violence that has followed its establishment. I would definitely not take that view in the way that that's phrased. That's about 13% of Democrats. This is another bellwether question here, guys. Because within this 13%, some percentage of that are the people that I speak to a lot, the ones that are consuming a lot of like leftist alternative media. I don't know what percentage of this number that means, but not terribly different between male and female, not very different at all across racial demographics here. Very unsurprising that the plurality of Actually, no, not even a plurality. But very not surprising that among the woke fringe, they have the highest percentage that was used this language. It's like 34%. Similar numbers to like what we found above here, up here with like racial stuff. Graduate, non-graduate, not terrible discrepancy there. And just not surprising in the slightest that the younger people more of them would have this view. And it just goes down, down, down. Only 6% of 65 plus would hold this view. And then not sure, it's about 23%, which that's not surprising either because this shit is fucking complicated. There's decades of history, really, I mean, over a century of history to unpack. So yeah, there's just a lot of people that don't really know much about what's happening. When it comes to billionaires, which comes closest to your view? Number 1, billionaires are good for the economy and shouldn't be penalized for their success. This is a very fringe view, and it is the least fringe. Wait, what? 12% of people under 50 say billionaires are good for the economy and shouldn't be penalized for their success. It's actually a lower percentage of older voters that take this view. That is another thing that surprises me. Huh. I mean, could that be just like a social media culture of like celebrating wealth, maybe? That's a little surprising to me. Oh, tech bros. Yeah, maybe tech. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Actually, yeah, that makes sense. The like tech Silicon Valley culture. The second option is billionaires can exist, but they should contribute more in taxes. Put me in this group for sure. This is a very clear majority of Democratic voters, 73%. Even a plurality of the woke fringe have this view, 44%. A clear majority of progressive liberals, 75%. Clear majority of moderates, 80%. Somewhat less clear majority of under 50. And an enormous majority with the boomers. The boomers are very fucking tax the rich. Look at that. And then the last option, besides not sure, is billionaires are bad for society and shouldn't exist. 14% of Democratic voters hold this view, which that is not terribly surprising to me. Similarly, this is not surprising to me either. So like, almost a plurality. I mean, it's like pretty close of the woke fringe. They're pretty divided on this. Because 43% of the woke fringe think that billionaires are bad for society and shouldn't exist. Under 50, not terribly surprising, under 50, highest percentage in terms of the age demographics is for people under 50 with 21% versus 8% of 50 plus. I don't know, these numbers are a bit, like a lot of different ways you can unpack these numbers. This is why when you see like Ezra Klein talk about how the emphasis on like anti-billionaire stuff is not really popular politically, and he's just right about that. Like the idea that billionaires like literally just shouldn't exist and we should devise a system that would, I guess, like cap income or cap wealth. That's actually a very fringe position in the Democratic Party. I did go over the methodology before we started. It was a combination of interviews like via text message, but that was like a smaller number. Here it is right here. It was the sample was reached via online panels. So that's pretty good. Like online panels that's not a bad situation there. And then SMS to web interviews. I'm not really sure what that means. If they're just they're just texted the questions and then they just answer the questions. Again, I will talk to Laksha on Thursday and I will ask him, because I'm sure he will have looked at this survey, and I'll ask him what he thinks of the methodology. And okay, what's the next one here? Oh God, I don't want to read this one. This one's going to make me depressed. Price controls often reduce supply and lead to shortages, so they usually create more problems than they solve. Oh. Oh God. This is depressing. 29% of Democrats and Kamala Harris voters. There's actually a decent consensus here, guys. 32% of moderates, 29% of progressive liberals, 24% of woke fringe, 26% of 50 plus versus 32% of under 50. This is actually the most agreement, I think, of any issue. The least divisive. The second option is price controls can be an effective way to keep prices affordable for consumers. Oof. 50%. Democratic Party and Harris voters. Oh God. Oh boy. That's not great. That's not great. I mean, what are can someone give me an example of price control policies that have been like successful in practice, didn't like destroy the markets or like disrupt the markets and have a bunch of negative externalities? Like what are some examples of price control policies that did not fuck with like supply chains and cause shortages? The insulin price cap. I would have to look into that policy because I don't even know the specifics of how they did that. Medical price caps is all I can think. I mean, do they do these price caps because like they subsidize somehow? They like subsidize the losses? Like I don't know enough about the mechanisms of price caps on insulin to comment about that. But I would say just generally speaking, I think there's a pretty broad consensus with economists that price controls are typically not great. Canada milk, but that's a whole supply management system. Was the insulin cap a price control or just a negotiated sale? See, that's a good question. I don't know, actually. Farm subsidies are a form of price control. Yeah, I guess. I suppose. Yeah, I guess. Would the CHIPS Act be a price control? I don't know. I actually don't know. I don't know. These are all great questions, but and then so yeah, wow. I mean, like there's so much agreement on this issue, you guys. This is kind of crazy. Like all of these demographics are pretty close to each other. Like there's the most agreement on this than anything else. Look at this. This is crazy. 50% of all Democratic voters, 49% of moderates, 53% of progressives, 50% of woke fringe, 50% of 50 plus, and 50% of under 50. There's so much agreement here. And then the second set of questions is the government should stay out of credit card interest rates. Capping rates could reduce access to credit, especially for lower income people. Put me in this camp, by the way. 29% of all Democratic voters versus 33% of progressives, 27% of progressive liberals, 22% of woke fringe, 26% of 50 plus, and 34% of under 50. A little bit more variety there, but not a crazy disparity. And then the government should cap credit card interest rates. Many companies can charge very high rates that can leave people stuck in debt. Ooh, that's not a... We got an issue here, guys. Guys, we got an issue here. We might be cooked. 57% of all Democrats, 54% of moderates, 61% of progressive liberals, 59% of woke fringe, 61% of 50 plus, 51% of under 50. Oof. Oh boy. Is it okay to be blackpilled if the SAVE thing passes? The SAVE Act is not going to pass unless, did I miss something? Did the Senate Republicans agree to get rid of the filibuster? I didn't miss anything, right? They did? No, they didn't. I mean, like, look, guy, if you're worried about the SAVE Act, here you go. Oh, that's not it. There we go. List of GOP senators who are not yet fully on board with passing the SAVE Act via standing filibuster. Apparently there's an updated list down here. I mean, that's a lot of opposition, you guys. That's like 20. That's like 23 or 20. I'm just eyeballing it here. That's a lot of senators that are uncomfortable with getting rid of the filibuster to pass the thing. So I don't know, guy. To me, I would not worry too much about the SAVE Act. I think there's a bit of reverse Green Lantern going on these days in Destiny spaces. The Republicans have given up on doing another fucking reconciliation bill. Do people understand this, you guys? They did the one big beautiful bill. You know, you can do like a couple few reconciliation packages per year, which means you can pass things with a simple majority as long as it complies with like the Byrd rule and you're not adding anything to the deficit in a permanent and lasting way. And, you know, that's what the one big beautiful bill was. They didn't need Democrats. The filibuster didn't apply. And, you know, like the ARP, when Biden was president, that was done through reconciliation. And so they're very publicly saying, like, we're not even going to do another reconciliation bill this year because the caucuses are just way too chaotic and fractured, and they're losing so many elections, and they're just like not doing well. So the idea that they could pass something like the SAVE Act, which would be, you know, a pretty drastic, you know, codified set of restrictions, it's just not likely. It's very, very unlikely that they're going to pass the SAVE Act, guys. I don't know why Destiny dooms about this stuff. I wonder, guys, does Destiny, I mean, tell me what you think honestly here. Obviously, I think Destiny is pretty sharp guy. Unusually so, I would say. But I don't know how much he knows about the actual Congress. Like, I don't know if he knows much about like the actual people that are in the Congress. You know what I mean? Because he'll say stuff like, you know, theoretically, oh yeah, you know, the way I would get the thing that I want is just, oh, you just pack the court, and he doesn't seem to be super aware of like how much resistance there would be to packing the court. And he says he's really scared of the SAVE Act passing, but doesn't seem to be aware that the Republican Party are currently not anywhere close to the kind of consensus they would need to pass the SAVE Act. I don't know if he's super familiar with like how many senators have come out in opposition to getting rid of the filibuster. My theory is Destiny is using a rhetorical tactic to push the Overton window. If this was his actual strategy, he wouldn't be able to admit it either, because what's the point? Maybe. I don't know. Destiny is massive on research, but if he hasn't looked into it specifically, he's very much low information. Main focus over the last few years has been researching discrete events and debunking talking points, so it wouldn't surprise me. I think a lot of this has to do with Destiny's interpretation of the immunity ruling. That's why he's becoming more radical. Well, that much is true. I am bald. That's true. That's true. Somebody asked me about marathon, playing marathon solo. I haven't done any of the lockdown events. I haven't done any of the like special events. I'm still sort of getting familiar with the maps, and I'm just taking my time. I'm just taking my time learning the game. But, you know, solos are tough, but I would say they're still like very fun. I have to do with, I think I already got you. Perry with 137 months. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. And then Bulb with $5. I don't know if banning anime is outside or inside our liberal framework, but it should be banned. I have another theory too, that like so much of the reason why people expect there to be some immediate fix to problems, both in terms of like DGG as of late, and I would say the
it's
far
called hentai, and it's art.
And the far left, there's like a lot of like Green Lantern theory of politics going on. And I have a theory, again, I have the theory that the arts have a lot to do with this. Like you watch a inspiring show like Andor, or, you know, any kind of show with like political intrigue and, you know, the outnumbered underdogs that are fighting for some virtuous cause, and they're up against like an entire system, and there's all these stories in media and in movies and in film and in books and in that kind of hype up this kind of underdog dynamic, and then against all odds good prevails in a kind of immediate kind of way. But in reality, in especially in like the American system, these things oftentimes take time. They take a lot of time. Take years, take decades. Yeah, it's definitely the books and movies, not Trump just jamming EOs to get what he wants. But this is another example, I think, of people not really understanding what is... Like when somebody says, well, why can't the Democrats just pack the court next time because look at what Trump's doing. He just does all these executive orders. Well, there's a fundamental lack of understanding of the mechanisms of government that Trump is using to do the things that he wants to do versus the mechanisms of government that the Democrats would have to go through and the processes that they would have to go through to get what they want. There's an answer to that question. Like when you ask the question, like how come Trump can get so much of what he wants versus there's an answer to that question, but it involves learning, how do you pass a bill? What is the filibuster? What is reconciliation? What can you pass with reconciliation? What is the Congress like these days in terms of how open are people in the Congress to getting rid of the filibuster? And what is the history of the filibuster? And like, what can you do versus executive authority? What can't you do with executive authority? Like there's like, that's a really complicated question, I guess, because you have to learn a lot of things. And so, you know, that's not an easy thing to unpack. But when somebody asks that question, I'm like, okay, well, you just don't really understand what we're talking about, you know? Like, there are answers to your questions. There, you can't answer, you know. Trump will not give up power if we impeach him. Well, I think the Democrats are going to impeach him. He's just not going to be convicted in the Senate. And so, pretty sure we're going to be stuck with this fucking guy for the next 3 years of his full term. And that's just baked in. Not much you can do about that. Okay. That's the point. Trump can move quicker, so there is less time to react, and therefore it's more scary what could happen in a shorter time frame. But I don't think people really recognize how many times he has been like smacked down. He's tried to do, like well over a dozen things through executive order or whatever, presidential decree or whatever he said, like policy via tweet. And he's been constrained a number of times, like do you guys remember he signed a executive order trying to end mail-in ballots or something, right? That shit got smacked down, he had a federal court issue an injunction and forced him to like withdraw National Guard troops from some state. I don't remember what state. Was it California? He is trying to like target his political enemies with lawfare and just failing like every step of the way. He's been constrained in very, very significant ways. If he was not constrained, I think we would have fucking camps. We would have fucking concentration camps. That guy is a fucking authoritarian. He is a narcissist, okay? Brother, he got his tariffs struck down and put new ones in the same day. The tariffs that he put in place are much more limited in scope, and they have a baked-in time limit. They're not the same tariffs. It's not accurate to say, well, he just did the tariffs anyways. That's not true. The tariffs that he invoked a new legal rationale to do tariffs, but they're much more limited. It is very similar to what Biden did with student loan debt. It is very similar. Okay. Regarding tariffs, holy shit, look at this consensus. The party has never been so united. That's like saying I just robbed one bank. It's not like I robbed 50 banks. I hate analogies these days. I hate it. It's nothing like that, by the way. Fucking nothing like that. I mean, goddamn, pretty much everybody agrees that tariffs are essentially taxes on the American people, raising prices and failing to help Americans manufacturing because it's hard to plan expansions with all the uncertainty. Just massive consensus on this one. Very little support for tariffs. President Donald Trump has recently supported a more active role for government in the economy. This has included government investment in certain companies, proposing caps on credit card interest rates, and using tariffs as a way to influence economic outcomes. With this in mind, which statement comes closer to your view? This one looks a little bit more divisive. A mostly free market economy with limited government intervention is still the best way to create growth and opportunity. The biggest disparity here is between the woke fringe and 50 plus, which not at all surprising. The 50 plus people remember the Cold War, and then like the boomers, they remember like the height of the Cold War stuff. And so not at all surprising. Similar numbers for every other group, though. I mean, it's like close to half. So a pretty clear plurality of Democratic voters, 49%, say that a mostly free market economy with limited government intervention is still the best way to create growth and opportunity. I would say that I'd probably be in this group, but I don't know if I didn't read this one here. The government needs to play a much larger role in directing the economy to create wealth for every American. No, I don't agree with that. In directing the economy, I don't know if I agree with that. I think like the government should provide like a robust welfare state. But I don't know if I would call that directing the economy. Would you call that directing the economy? Depends on who you ask. I don't know if I love a lot of the framing these questions. Woke fringe is actually a thing they write. I guess this Manhattan Institute is Republican. Well, they describe what it means. That's the label they gave, but they say that it is, they describe it here. You could say loaded language, but I don't know. Is it loaded language? I guess, but I mean, we're getting into some other shit here. So the woke fringe, it's only about a third of them think that a mostly free market economy is the move versus 46%. Say the government needs to play a much larger role. 50 plus, 55% say free market. Under 50, it's a slight plurality at 42%. So a little divisive. I mean, honestly, when you really get at it, like this is kind of the heart of the ideological divide within the Democratic Party. Like this issue here, the answer to this question, I think represents besides Israel, obviously, like the deepest divisions within the party right now is, you do have like roughly a third of the party that think that we should move more towards like socialism or democratic socialism versus about half that think that, we're still capitalist. We should still be like a capitalist party, pro-capitalist party. Do you support or oppose requiring able-bodied adult recipients of government benefits like welfare to work in order for them to continue receiving those taxpayer-provided benefits? The different arguments that I've heard against these kinds of policies have to do with the administrative burden, and I'm not wonky enough to get into that myself. I would honestly probably say not sure here, leaning towards oppose, but just because I've read smarter people than me that can articulate the administrative costs for these kinds of things. But this is a lot of Democrats. This is 59% of Democrats supported in some way versus 28% of Democrats who oppose it in some way. Not a terribly surprising discrepancy here, the disparity between moderates and the woke fringe. It's 69% of moderates agree versus 42% of the woke fringe. Which statement comes closer to your view about permits for building housing, energy projects, and infrastructure? Oh no, abundance is getting hammered here. The government should make it faster and easier to get permits because long delays raise costs and make it harder to build what we need. Oh God, abundance is not. It's funny because the politicians are doing abundance policies because they know they're good policies. They're just doing them. Mamdani's doing abundance. Democratic governors are doing abundance. They're just doing the policies. I don't think this is something that gets voters enthusiastic to vote. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think like people that show up to vote of the people in 2026, I don't think a sizable percentage of them are going to be motivated by like abundance policies. But it's 37% of the party are abundance pilled versus 51%. Say the government should keep thorough permitting and review processes because they help protect the environment, public safety, and local communities. Ironically, oh wait, no, I read that wrong. Yeah, that's not surprising. So 41% of moderates, that was like the highest percentages between the groups here versus 31% of woke fringe are abundance pilled. But still the concept is unpopular. I think if we have a situation where a bunch of blue cities and states adopt abundance policies and actually get the cost of housing down, then I think that you would see more support for these policies. But again, I don't know if there's like, I think like the people that are having like abundance debates, these are people that are like really plugged into politics, and I don't think it's just something that fucking people think about a lot. And then we have a bunch of subcategories here. So Russian President Vladimir Putin has compromising information on Donald Trump and uses it to sway Trump's policy positions. A pretty clear majority of Democrats believe this. I believe that, by the way. I think the fucking P-tape is real. I think it's fucking real, okay? At minimum, he definitely has a fucking video of Donald Trump, like, fucking Russian prostitutes, and like, minimum. I think the fucking P-tape is real. Legit. I'm not even kidding. I think it's real. COVID-19 leaked from a laboratory in China. A plurality of Democrats think this. 48% of plurality. The assassination attempt against Donald Trump in July was orchestrated by his supporters to increase sympathy for him. Oh God, we're cooked. Oh fuck, we are cooked. A plurality of Democrats believe this, you guys. 46%? Is that the math? Jesus Christ. Dems don't want to be normal. They're definitely not normal in this respect. They're very conspiracy brained on this one. Ooh, we're getting into Israel again. The October 7, 2023 attack on Israel was an inside job or a false flag operation. That's a quarter of the party, you guys. I don't love that. I don't love that. I don't love that. I don't love that. The 9/11 terror attacks were carried out by additional actors beyond just Al-Qaeda or other Muslim extremist groups, likely orchestrated or permitted by the US government. Oh my God. It's 28% of Democrats think that like we're in like Bush did 9/11 territory. Jesus. We spend all this time talking about fucking crazy QAnon people. Turns out there are a shitload of fucking weirdos and fanatics in the Democratic Party who believe crazy shit. NASA faked the 1969 Apollo 11 moon landing. 16% of Democrats think that this is true. Childhood vaccines cause autism. 13%. The Holocaust of Jews in Nazi Germany was greatly exaggerated or did not happen as historians describe. 12% of Democrats. Oh no. These are, it's good to see these numbers so low, but this one kind of freaks me out. How the fuck, like 46% of Democrats think that the assassination attempt was an inside job to make him more sympathetic? The false flag, I don't love this number. I don't love that. A quarter of Democrats think that October 7th was a false flag. Jesus. I would bet very good money that Republicans are more conspiratorial, but Okay, what time is it? Yeah, you know what, guys? We're going to call it there. We didn't even get to the things that were in the fucking video description, so we're going to have to find some time tomorrow to get to them. There's so many other videos I want to get to as well. I do need to stretch my legs a little bit, go take a little walk. Nexie with 4 months. I support your P-tape claims. The P-tape is real. I don't care. It is real. They got that man dead to rights. Is IRI live right now? He is. Georgia special election tonight. Okay. Iran begins laying mines in Strait of Hormuz. Jesus. All right, we got the redirect to IRI. Twitch, you guys can go nuts. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it, and I'll see you guys tomorrow at the regular time. If I can get my fucking sleep cycle regulated. I couldn't wake up this morning. I was fucking tired as shit. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye. I love you. Bye.